The goal today is to give a few minutes of tips of do's and don'ts on pitching. So again, my name is Andrea Barrica, and today we're going to talk about pitching. I am currently a venture partner, which is in the investment team at 500 Startups. And yeah, so my background is pretty simple. I co-founded a company called invaluable. Invaluable was a Y Combinator and 500 Startups invested company. I started a project called SlideChef where I was actually building deck software, and now I invest in companies from all over the world at 500 Startups. So again, that's just my background. And today we're going to talk about pitching. And the problem with pitching is that what people say, what they mean to say, and what the audience actually hears often does not translate. And so what we see is a lot of slides that look like this and just a ton of terrible pitches all the time. And so I want to help all of you when you go on stage to pitch a startup Istanbul, can avoid that. And so I have just prepared just a few quick do's and don'ts to share with all of you. And then we will go into live mentoring where people will pitch and we will go through and I'll give feedback and help kind of hopefully give people a good sense of what judges and what the audience will be thinking and looking for. All right, so don't number one that I'm going to go over is it's important that when you're going through a process that you kind of step away from the slides first. It's very obvious to us as investors when something, especially on a competition, was created slides first. People create, like on the internet, they find the slides that say, problem, solution, market, and these are not compelling and these are not a good place to start because it's really, especially for a 2.5 minute pitch, it's more important to figure out right away, like what is the single takeaway of my pitch? Like what are people going to remember after my pitch? So if it's, is it traction? Is it your team? Is it something that's really special? And the worst thing you can do is try to have too many takeaways of your pitch. And that's probably the number one mistake we see is too many details, overly going over product, and not being very clear about what the audience and what the judges and what the investors are going to remember. So instead of kind of opening a PowerPoint file and going right into it, I always tell people, like, take out a journal, take out a piece of paper, and write down, like, what if I went up to somebody after your pitch and asked them, what do you remember about this pitch? What would you want them to say? And definitely a takeaway is always like, is it clear? And if it's clear, then what is now very interesting about this team, or this traction. So that's the first don't. And then number one is the story. Like another reason why we don't want to see like us, kind of a very generic deck template that you get online with you when you have, traction. It's very people. And so what I tell people to do instead is to tell a very strategic story. So for example, instead of me saying my company, has a great engagement, you can just make the claim. Instead, you could talk about how, you have a customer that signed on and the first day they open your app or your product, they use it over 100 times. That's a story that someone told at our demo day because they had an app where you could record dance videos and they had a dancer, immediately come on that was pretty famous and just kept opening the app. And that was not only memorable, but it was strategic because we all could remember that, oh, okay, this app is obviously very engaging, but they did it through a story, not through just making these claims in a pitch. So that's another thing that I would suggest is finding one really good story to add. And it's not always like how we came up with this idea. And it's not always a customer story. It can be a lot of different stories. And so throughout the session today, I hope to hear like any interesting stories, and I'll be very honest about whether I think it's strategic. So, and the question always about is how does this story help you achieve your goal? So for example, the engagement story is really important because that was definitely the most interesting thing about that company. They didn't have a ton of users yet. They didn't have, the best, they weren't monetizing very well, but they had just this very, very strong engagement. So the goal of getting invested for them was all around that, like achieving that story, achieving that point. So that's why stories, like too many stories don't your goal because people just get bored or they don't really get the takeaway that you're trying to communicate. And the do number two is knowing your secret sauce. This is sometimes known as like knowing your moat, differentiation, all of this. And the interesting thing about this, because I've heard so many startup pitches, is that many people really don't know what their secret sauce is, or they think it's something that it's not. And so a good way to go is what is most compelling about your business. And it's very important that you ask a lot of people about what this is and don't just ask your co-founders, especially if the co-founders are very product heavy or technical Very technical, very product heavy companies tend to just pitch their product and pitch features of their product. And they don't actually think about what's most compelling about the business. It could be a very differentiated hack on distribution. It could be a very differentiated hack on the team that gives them an unfair advantage. So this is also known as unfair advantage. Cheat sheet that I like to put in order is most startups fall into this category, and it is actually in order of importance. Like if you have $1 million of revenue, or if you have, a ton of users, that's attraction. Like that's definitely what's most compelling about you is going to be your traction, your revenue, right? But a lot of teams don't have this. And so the next thing that can be really like compelling for investors is team. And a lot of people say team, but they don't really tell you what they mean. So I'm going to just tell you what people mean. They mean, has this team executed in the past? Do they have a previous exit? Have they worked in brands that leverage a lot of network and power? So these are like your ex-Google, first hire at WhatsApp, these kind of things, or just a deep knowledge about the space, and then you can quantify that by years. So it's definitely team next. Product's probably third. Like if it is a very technical, or there's something about the product that is extremely special, then that can be definitely next. And then the fourth thing, and if you don't have traction and you don't have a stellar team and your product's not that good, you're probably going to be pitching your vision. And the key to vision pitches is that you have to be amazing at pitching. So typically you find that like if you see a team or a product that gets funded or wins a pitch competition and you didn't think their pitch was that good, they probably had the numbers, the traction, the revenue to back it up, or a stellar team, or just like an unbelievable product. But if you see a vision pitch win, or if you see a team with not 1, 2, or 3, get funded, they probably have just such an amazing vision and storytelling ability. So that's typically like how I think about this hierarchy, and a lot of investors do as well. So number 2 is not really going to be, this is more general, this is in your life, not like for this competition, but I always tell people not to be a one pitch pony, meaning that you're going to have a different pitch for different audiences. So if you were pitching to only investors, you need an investor pitch. If you're pitching to customers, that's going to be a very different pitch. Like one of the top mistakes I see is that people keep doing the same exact pitch for such different audiences. And the most common reason we hate a pitch is because it's a sales pitch. They're trying to sell us a product. But as investors, we don't care. We don't give a shit product at all, honestly. We give a shit about the business, the opportunity, and the things that we've been talking about, the team and the traction. Whereas customers of your product don't give a shit about the market. They only care about the pain. So I always say, prepare a different pitch for each audience, because when people say know your audience, they typically don't tell you to make more than one pitch, and so that advice can be really useless. So this is not really relevant for this pitch competition, but in your like entrepreneurial and founder journeys, like make sure you have a different pitch, and also for recruiting. Your pitch to new people you want to bring onto your team should also be different. So yes, in your life cycle, like definitely create more than one pitch. Moving on. So do number 3, we're going to do this today. Because we have, 2.5 minutes is a good amount, but I always like to make people pass a 60-second test with their pitch. And that is, pitch me in 60 seconds, and will I know what's most interesting about you, or will I want to have a second conversation? That's always like such an important test. I started a group here in San Francisco called Pitch Masters, and we do this 60-second test, and entrepreneurs find that they really understand like what they're doing wrong, because it's very difficult to tell someone your company in 60 seconds, which is why it's thing. So this is good to do with friends before you go to the conference, because you're constantly having to pitch somebody random in the elevator, someone on the conference floor, and you probably need to know your 60-second version, which should be a very brief version of your 2.5 minute. And if they're wildly different, there's usually something wrong. And the real kind of final point here is that no one is as interested in you as you think they are, which is why the 60-second test and 60-second rule is that important. The last delivery tip is the 20-to-1 rule. So the 20-to-1 rule is pretty simple. It's practice out loud 20 minutes for every 1 minute of your presentation. And for all of you competing, I would say 100 minutes. And that's just really important because delivery is often the least prepared, but it can be the most impactful. So definitely do not forget to practice your delivery. And this rule is a rule that a lot of professional speakers do. And out loud should be in front of people, and 100% trying to copy what the experience will be, if possible, at Startup Istanbul.